cold wind moved slowly across the empty red desert, carrying dust and small pieces of broken metal through the air. On this lonely planet, war had ended many years ago, but the scars were still everywhere. Old ships, broken weapons, and destroyed machines were half buried in the sand like forgotten skeletons. A human scavenger named Irene walked carefully through the silent wasteland. He carried a small tool bag and a scanning device in his hand, always searching for something valuable to sell. Life as a scavenger was never easy, but Aaron had learned how to survive alone. Most people avoided this planet because it was once a battlefield between powerful alien empires. But for Aaron, that danger also meant opportunity. Where others saw ruins, he saw parts, metal, and forgotten technology. The sky above him was quiet and gray, just like every other day. But suddenly his scanner started making the sharp beeping sound. Aaron frowned and looked down at the screen. The signal was strong. Stronger than any normal scrap metal signal. He slowly raised his head and looked toward the sky. At first he saw nothing, only clouds and empty space. Then something bright appeared far above the clouds. A small object was falling fast, leaving a thin line of fire behind it. Aaron's eyes widened with surprise. "That looks like an escape pod," he muttered quietly. The object burned through the atmosphere and rushed toward the desert. A loud roaring sound filled the air as the pod dropped lower and lower. Then suddenly, boom! The escape pod crashed into the desert not far from him, throwing sand and smoke into the air. Aaron covered his face as the hot wind rushed past him. For a few seconds, everything was silent again, only the soft sound of falling sand could be heard. Aaron slowly lowered his arm and stared at the crash site. His heart was beating faster now. Escape pods usually meant something very valuable. Advanced alien technology, emergency supplies, maybe even rare power cells. He quickly grabbed his bag and began walking toward the smoke rising in the distance. As he moved closer, the damaged pod became clearer. It had deep scratches across its metal shell, and one side was badly burned. Small sparks flickered around the broken door. Aaron stopped a few steps away and studied the strange design. "This isn't from any ship I know," he said quietly. He carefully pulled out a small cutting tool. The pod door was half stuck, bent from the crash. With a few careful movements, he forced the metal open, just enough to see inside. At first he expected to find a soldier, or maybe a dead pilot, but what he saw made him freeze completely. Inside the pod, hiding in the corner, was a small alien child. She looked no older than 6 or 7 years. Her pale blue skin trembled as she held her knees tightly against her chest. Large glowing eyes stared at him with pure fear. The moment she saw the human face looking inside, she screamed, "Please don't eat me," she cried in a shaking voice. "I'm not dangerous. Please don't eat me, human." Rin blinked in confusion, completely shocked by the words. "Eat you?" he repeated quietly. The child pressed herself harder against the metal wall of the pod, trying to hide. Her small hands were shaking badly. "Humans are monsters," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "They hunt children like me." Rin stood there silently, trying to understand what he was hearing. No one had ever said something like that to him before. He slowly lowered his tool and raised his empty hands to show he meant no harm. "Hey, calm down," he said gently. "I'm not going to hurt you." But the alien girl didn't seem to believe him at all. Her frightened eyes stayed locked on him. Then Aaron noticed something strange in her hands. The child was holding a small glowing device close to her chest. It looked like a metal sphere covered in soft blue light. At first it seemed quiet, but suddenly the device made a soft clicking sound. The blue light became brighter, and a thin beam of light shot upward from the sphere, disappearing into the sky. Aaron's face slowly turned serious as he stared at the device, because he had seen signals like that before, and he knew exactly what they meant. Somewhere far above the planet, something had just received that signal, and now someone was coming. Aaron slowly stepped back from the broken escape pod. his eyes still fixed on the small glowing device in the alien girl's hands. The blue light from the sphere slowly faded, but the message had already been sent into space. Aaron knew what that meant. Someone out there now knew exactly where this pod had crashed. The little alien girl noticed the change in his face and pulled the device closer to her chest, as if it was the only thing protecting her. Her glowing eyes were still full of fear. "You should go," she whispered quickly. "They will come soon." Aaron looked back at her and crossed his arms, thinking for a moment. "Who will come?" he asked calmly. The girl shook her head and looked down at the metal floor of the pod. "My people," she said softly. Aaron expected relief in her voice when she said that, but instead he heard something very different. Fear, real fear. "They are not coming to rescue me," she continued quietly. "They are coming to take me back." Ren frowned slightly. "That sounds like rescue to me," he said. The alien girl quickly shook her head again. This time much faster. "No," she said firmly. "They will lock me away again." Her small fingers tightened around the glowing sphere, as if she never wanted to let it go. Aaron leaned against the side of the damaged pod and studied her carefully. Up close she looked even smaller than he first thought. Her thin arms were scratched, and part of her strange silver clothing was torn from the crash. "You have a name?" Aaron asked after a moment. The girl hesitated before answering. "Leary," she said quietly. "Well, Leary," Aaron replied in a calm voice. "My name is Aaron." Leary looked up slowly, surprised that the human had shared his name. For a moment she simply stared at him, confused. "You told me your name," she said. "Of course," Aaron said with a small shrug. "Why wouldn't I?" Leary blinked slowly, clearly struggling to understand. "Because humans don't do that," she answered softly. "They hunt us," Aaron sighed, and rubbed the back of his neck. "I think someone gave you very bad information about humans," he said. Leary looked away again, still unsure. "My teacher said humans are cruel," she whispered. "They said humans destroy everything." Aaron chuckled quietly at that, though there was no humor in his eyes. "Trust me," he said. "The galaxy says the same thing about almost every species." For a moment neither of them spoke. The desert. Wind blew softly across the broken metal of the escape pod, carrying dust through the open door. Then Leary's stomach made a quiet growling sound. She quickly covered it with her hands, embarrassed. Aaron noticed and reached into his bag. He pulled out a small food pack and tossed it gently toward her. Leary flinched when the pack landed beside her feet. "Relax," Aaron said, raising his hands. "Again, it's just food." Leary stared at the pack as if it might explode. "Is it poisoned?" she asked carefully. Aaron blinked, surprised by the question. "No," he said simply, slowly, very slowly. Leary picked up the pack and examined it. After a moment she opened it and took a small bite. Her glowing eyes widened in surprise. "It's sweet," she said softly. "Yeah," Aaron replied. "It's not fancy, but it works." Leary took another small bite, then another, eating faster now. For the first time since Aaron found her, the fear in her face began to fade a little, but Aaron's attention was not on her anymore. He had pulled out his scanner again. The screen showed something that made his expression turn serious. Several signals had just appeared far above the planet. Ships, and they were moving fast. Aaron looked back toward the sky. They didn't waste any time. He muttered quietly. Leary stopped eating, her fear returning instantly. "They found us?" she asked in a small voice. Aaron nodded slowly. "Looks like it," he said. The girl's hands began shaking again. "They will take me back," she whispered. Aaron looked down at the frightened child sitting inside the broken pod. For a moment he considered something very simple. He could walk away right now. He could leave the girl here and pretend he never saw anything. When those ships arrived, it would no longer be his problem. That would be the safe choice. But Aaron had never been very good at making safe choices. He sighed and grabbed his bag from the sand. "All right," he said calmly. Leary looked up at him in confusion. "All right what?" she asked. Aaron pointed toward the horizon where his small ship was hidden behind a line of rocks. "If someone is coming to grab you," he said, "then we probably shouldn't still be standing here." Leary stared at him, shocked. You would help me?" she asked slowly. Aaron shrugged again. "You're just a kid," he said. "That's reason enough." But before Leary could say anything else, Aaron's scanner suddenly made a loud warning sound. Both of them looked down at the screen at the same time. 3 large ships had just entered the planet's atmosphere, and they were heading directly toward the crash site. Aaron looked back toward the sky and exhaled slowly. "Well," he muttered, "looks like we're out of time." The scanner in Aaron's hand continued to beep loudly, the warning sound cutting through the quiet desert wind. 3 large ships were descending through the clouds above the planet, their engines glowing like small suns in the gray sky. Aaron stared at the screen for a moment, then looked up at the sky again. "They're fast," he muttered, inside the broken escape pod. Leary had gone completely still. Her small hands were shaking as she looked upward, even though the ships were still too far away to see clearly. "They came," she whispered, fear filling her voice. Aaron looked back at her and quickly stepped closer to the pod. "How long before they reach us?" he asked. Leary swallowed nervously, thinking, maybe 10 minutes. She said quietly. Aaron nodded once. 10 minutes was not much time, but it was something. "All right," he said. "Then we need to move now." Leary looked confused. "Move where?" she asked. Aaron pointed toward the distant rocks at the edge of the desert. "My ship is hidden over there," he explained. For a moment Leary simply stared at him. "You want to take me with you?" she asked slowly. Aaron raised an eyebrow. "Do you want to stay here when those ships land?" he asked back. Leary quickly shook her head. "No," she whispered. Aaron held out his hand toward her. "Then come on," he said. The alien girl looked at his hand carefully. It was the hand of a human, the species she had been taught to fear her entire life. Her teachers had always told her that humans were dangerous creatures, monsters that destroyed worlds and hunted weaker species. But humans standing in front of her had just given her food, spoken kindly to her, and now offered to help her escape. Leary slowly reached out and placed her small hand in his. Her fingers were cold and trembling. Aaron gently helped her climb out of the damaged pod. She was lighter than he expected, almost fragile. When her feet touched the sand, she looked around nervously. The desert suddenly felt very large and very open. "They will scan the area," she said quickly. "They will see the crash." Aaron nodded, already moving. "Then we better not be here when they land," he said. They began running across the desert toward the distant rocks. The sand was soft under their feet, slowing them down. Behind them, dark smoke was still rising from the crashed pod, making it easy to spot from the sky. After a minute of running, Leary looked back. Far above them, the 3 ships had become visible, large triangular shapes cutting through the clouds. "They're closer," she said with panic in her voice. Aaron kept moving, breathing steadily. "Don't look back," he said. "Just keep running." Leary nodded and forced herself to keep going. Her small legs struggled to keep up with the human's long steps. After a few moments, Aaron noticed and slowed down slightly. "Sorry," he said. "I forgot you're smaller." Leary didn't answer. She was too busy trying to breathe. Finally, the tall rocks came into view, forming a narrow canyon in the desert ground. Aaron quickly led her inside. Hidden between the rocks was a small human transport ship. It wasn't very impressive. The paint was scratched. The metal panels were old, and one of the engines looked like it had been repaired many times. But to Aaron it was home. Leary stared at the ship with wide eyes. "This is your ship?" she asked. Aaron nodded. "She's not pretty," he said, "but she flies." Suddenly a deep rumbling sound echoed across the sky above them. The first alien ship was now flying low over the desert. Scanning the crash site, Leary froze, fear returning to her face. "They're here," she whispered. Aaron quickly opened the side door of his ship. "Inside," he said. Leary didn't hesitate this time. She climbed in quickly. Aaron followed and rushed to the control seat. The ship's old systems flickered to life as he activated the engines. Lights filled the small cockpit, and the console began to hum softly. Outside, another loud roar echoed as the second alien ship passed overhead. "They will search the area," Leary said nervously. "They won't stop until they find me." Aaron's hands moved quickly across the controls, preparing the ship for takeoff. "Then it's a good thing we're leaving," he said calmly. The engines behind them suddenly growled louder. Dust and sand blew away from the ship as the thrusters powered up. Leary gripped the side of the seat tightly. She had never been inside a human ship before. Above them, the alien ships were beginning to spread out across the desert. Scanning for life signals, one of them slowly turned toward the canyon. Leary saw it through the cockpit window and gasped. "They're coming this way," she said. Irene glanced at the radar screen. Sure enough, one of the ships had started moving toward their location. Aaron smiled slightly, though his eyes stayed focused on the controls. Well, he said quietly, "Looks like this might get interesting." With a sudden burst of power, the ship lifted off the ground. Sand exploded beneath them as the engines roared. The small transport shot upward into the sky, climbing fast. Behind them, the alien ship immediately turned and began chasing them, and within seconds, the other two ships followed. 3 warships chasing one small human transport across the sky. Leary stared at the radar screen, her voice shaking. "They will catch us," she whispered. Aaron leaned back slightly in his seat, guiding the ship higher into the clouds. "Maybe," he said calmly, "but not without a little fun first." The small human transport ship climbed higher into the gray sky, its engines roaring as Aaron pushed the controls forward. Behind them, the 3 alien warships followed like dark shadows, moving faster and faster across the clouds. Inside the cockpit, warning lights blinked softly on the control panel. Leary sat quietly in the second seat, gripping the edge tightly as the ship shook during the climb. She kept looking at the radar screen, where 3 bright red dots were slowly getting closer. "They are faster than us," she said nervously. Aaron nodded without looking away from the controls. "Yeah," he said calmly. "Warships usually are." The transport ship finally broke through the clouds and entered the thin upper atmosphere of the planet. Below them, the red desert looked small and distant. Above them, space waited in dark silence. Aaron adjusted the navigation controls and aimed the ship toward orbit. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Leary slowly looked at the human sitting beside her. "You should leave me," she said quietly. Aaron glanced at her for a moment, confused. "Leave you?" he repeated. Leary nodded, her glowing eyes filled with worry. "If they catch you with me, they will destroy your ship," she said. "They don't allow outsiders to interfere." Aaron leaned back in his seat slightly, still guiding the ship upward. "That sounds like their problem," he replied. Leary shook her head quickly. "No," she said. "It will become your problem too." Aaron gave a small smile. "Trust me," he said. "Trouble and I know each other very well." The ship suddenly shook harder as it pushed through the last layer of atmosphere. A moment later, the sky turned black. Stars appeared everywhere around them, shining quietly in the darkness of space. For a brief moment, the cockpit was peaceful, but the radar screen quickly ruined that moment. The 3 alien ships had also left the atmosphere and were still chasing them. Their engines burned brightly as they closed the distance. "They're not giving up," Aaron muttered. Leary looked down at her hands, still holding the glowing metal sphere tightly. "You don't understand," she said softly. "They cannot give up." Aaron glanced at her. "Again, what does that mean?" he asked. Leary hesitated, as if she wasn't sure if she should say anything. Then she slowly lifted the glowing sphere and placed it carefully on the console between them. "This is not just a tracker," she explained. Aaron looked at the device more carefully now. The blue light inside it pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. "What is it then?" he asked. Leary took a slow breath before answering. It contains something very important, she said quietly. Aaron waited for her to continue. But when she didn't speak again, he sighed softly. Important how? He asked. Leary finally looked up at him again. Her glowing eyes were serious now. Inside this device, she said slowly, is the location of something ancient. Aaron raised an eyebrow. Ancient? He repeated. Leary nodded. Something my people found many years ago, she said. A machine older than any known civilization. Aaron frowned slightly as he listened. That sounds like the kind of thing powerful people fight wars over, he said. Leary nodded again. They already are, she replied. The ship shook slightly as one of the alien warships fired a warning shot that passed far behind them. Aaron glanced at the radar again and sighed. Well, that explains why they're chasing us so hard, he said. Leary lowered her head. My mind holds the key to unlock the machine, she whispered. Aaron slowly turned his head toward her. Wait, he said. Your mind? Leary nodded slowly. When I was very young, my scientists placed the machine's map inside my memory, she explained. They said only I could guide them to it. Aaron leaned back in his chair, clearly surprised. So you're basically a living treasure map, he said. Leary didn't smile. They never asked if I wanted to be, she replied quietly. For a moment the cockpit was silent again. The only sound was the steady hum of the engines and the distant alarms warning about the ships behind them. Aaron stared out at the stars through the front window, thinking, helping a lost child was one thing. Helping the most valuable target in the galaxy was something very different. Leary seemed to understand what he was thinking. You can still leave me, she said softly. If you drop me in a pod, they will stop chasing you. Aaron slowly looked back at her. She was just a child sitting in a large metal chair, her feet barely reaching the floor. A child carrying a secret powerful enough to start a war. Aaron rubbed his face with one hand and sighed deeply. You really don't know humans very well, he said. Leary blinked in confusion. What do you mean? She asked. Aaron smiled slightly as he pushed the ship's engines harder, sending the transport flying faster through space. It means, he said calmly, I'm not dropping a kid into space just to make my life easier. At that exact moment, the radar alarm suddenly screamed loudly. Both of them looked down at the screen. One of the alien warships had just locked weapons on their ship, and the distance between them was getting dangerously small. Aaron stared at the screen and muttered quietly under his breath. Well, he said, now things are about to get serious. The alarm inside the cockpit screamed loudly as the enemy warship locked its weapons on the small transport ship. Red warning lights flashed across the control panel while the radar screen blinked with danger signals. Leary's glowing eyes widened with fear as she stared at the display. They locked on, she whispered, her voice shaking. Aaron leaned forward in his seat and grabbed the control stick tightly. Yeah, I noticed, he said calmly though. His eyes were now sharp and focused. Outside the window, the dark space around them looked peaceful. But the radar told a very different story. 3 powerful warships were chasing them, and one of them had already prepared to fire. Aaron quickly pushed a few buttons on the console, sending more power to the engines. The small ship suddenly surged forward with a loud burst of speed. The stars outside the cockpit stretched slightly as the transport moved faster, but the alien warship behind them did not slow down. In fact, it began closing the distance even faster. They will destroy US, Leary said quietly, gripping the edge of her seat. Aaron glanced at her for a second and then looked back at the radar. Maybe, he said, but not if I can help it. Suddenly a bright beam of energy shot past their ship, missing them by only a few meters. The light flashed across the cockpit window before disappearing into deep space. Leary gasped and covered her mouth. That was a warning shot, she said nervously. Aaron shook his head slightly. No, he replied. That was them trying to see how fast we can move. Another beam flashed behind them, closer this time. The enemy ships were testing their aim, learning how the human ship moved. Aaron knew that sooner or later, one of those shots would hit. He needed a plan, and fast. He quickly opened a star map on the navigation screen. A cluster of small moving shapes appeared ahead of them, asteroids, hundreds of them floating together like a dark cloud of stone and metal. Aaron smiled slightly when he saw them. That might work, he muttered to himself. Leary noticed the change in his face and looked at the screen. What is that? She asked. An asteroid field, Aaron answered. Leary immediately shook her head. No, she said quickly. That is too dangerous. Aaron chuckled softly. Exactly, he replied. The small ship turned slightly as he adjusted their course. Instead of flying away from danger, Aaron aimed the ship directly toward the massive asteroid field. Behind them, the three warships continued chasing without slowing down. Another beam of energy shot toward them. This time it struck the edge of the transport ship. The cockpit shook violently as sparks burst from the control panel. Leary cried out in fear and grabbed the side of her seat. Damage report, Aaron muttered, quickly checking the system display. One of the side panels had been burned badly, but the engines were still working. Still flying, he said with a small nod. The asteroid field grew larger in front of them. Huge rocks slowly rotated through space, some the size of small buildings. Others were even larger, like floating mountains. The space between them was narrow and dangerous. One wrong move could destroy the ship instantly. Leary stared out the window in horror. You cannot fly through that, she said. Aaron raised an eyebrow slightly. Sure I can, he replied calmly. Just need to be careful. The ship entered the asteroid field at full speed. Immediately, Aaron began moving the controls rapidly, guiding the ship left and right through the dangerous maze of stone. Large asteroids passed close to the windows, some only a few meters away. The ship twisted and turned between them like a small bird flying through a forest. Behind them, alien warships followed, but their large size made it harder for them to move quickly between the rocks. One of the warships fired another shot. The beam struck a massive asteroid instead, shattering part of it into hundreds of smaller pieces. The explosion filled space with flying debris. Aaron saw an opportunity. He pushed the engines harder and guided the ship through the cloud of broken rock. The debris scattered everywhere, blocking the path behind them. One of the enemy warships tried to follow too quickly. Its massive wing struck a large asteroid. The impact caused a huge explosion that lit up the entire asteroid field. Leary watched in shock as the destroyed ship broke apart into glowing pieces of metal. They lost one, she whispered. Aaron nodded slightly but didn't celebrate yet. Two warships were still chasing them, and the asteroid field was not finished with them either. Suddenly a loud grinding sound came from the back of the ship. The transport shook violently again. Aaron checked the system display and frowned. A large piece of debris had struck the rear engine. Power levels began dropping quickly. Leary looked at the warning lights flashing across the console. What happened? She asked nervously. Aaron exhaled slowly and leaned back in his seat, still guiding the damaged ship between the asteroids. Our engine just took a bad hit, he said calmly. Leary looked back at the radar screen. The two remaining warships were still there, still getting closer, and now their ship was losing speed. Her small voice trembled as she asked the question she feared the most. What do we do now? The damaged transport ship drifted deeper into the asteroid field, its engines making a weak and uneven sound inside the cockpit. Warning lights flashed again and again across the control panel. Aaron kept one hand on the controls while the other quickly checked the engine systems on the screen. The rear engine had taken serious damage from the flying debris. Power was slowly dropping. Behind them, two alien warships were still chasing, moving carefully between the massive asteroids. They were slower now because of the dangerous rocks, but they were still closing the distance. Leary watched the radar screen with wide, worried eyes. They are still coming, she whispered. Aaron nodded, his face calm but focused. Yeah, he said quietly. I see them. Another loud warning beep. echoed through the cockpit. The engine power dropped again. Aaron sighed softly and leaned back for a second. Thinking, this ship won't last long like this, he said. Leary looked down at the glowing sphere still resting on the console. Then she slowly looked back at Aaron. I might be able to help, she said carefully. Aaron raised an eyebrow and looked at her. You can repair engines? He asked with a small smile. Leary shook her head. Not exactly, she replied. She gently picked up the glowing device and placed both of her hands around it. The blue light inside the sphere slowly became brighter. This device connects to my mind, she explained quietly. It was made to work with the ancient machine my people discovered. Aaron listened while guiding the ship between two massive spinning asteroids. So how does that help us now? He asked. Leary closed her glowing eyes for a moment, focusing. The device can also connect with other technology, she said softly. Sometimes I can control machines for a short time. Aaron looked interested now. You mean like remote control? He asked. Yes, Leary answered, but only for a little while. Another laser beam shot past their ship and struck a nearby asteroid. The explosion lit up the dark space around them. Aaron looked back at the radar again. The enemy ships were getting closer every second. Well, he said, if you have a trick that can help, now would be a very good time. Leary nodded slowly and placed the glowing sphere against the control panel. The blue light spread across the metal surface like soft water. For a moment nothing happened. Then suddenly several screens inside the cockpit flickered. The ship's damaged engine systems appeared on the display. But this time the information was moving faster, changing on its own. Aaron watched with surprise as the engine controls started adjusting automatically. What are you doing? He asked. I am guiding the power around the damaged parts, Leary said quietly. Her eyes were still closed as she concentrated deeply. The ship suddenly shook again, but this time the sound of the engine slowly became stronger. Aaron checked the power levels. The engine wasn't fully repaired, but the system had found a way to push more energy through the working sections. That's actually helping, Aaron said with honest surprise. Leary's small voice sounded tired now. I cannot hold it long, she whispered. Aaron quickly grabbed the control stick again. That's fine, he said. Just give me a little more speed. The transport ship suddenly surged forward, moving faster through the asteroid field again. Behind them, the alien warships tried to follow, but their larger size made the tight turns more difficult. Aaron saw another opportunity ahead. A dense cluster of spinning asteroids formed a narrow path through the field. It was extremely dangerous, even for a small ship. But it might be the only chance they had. Aaron aimed directly toward the narrow passage. Leary noticed and opened her eyes in shock. That path is too small, she said nervously. Aaron smiled slightly while focusing on the controls. Only if you fly badly, he replied. The ship rushed toward the narrow opening between the giant rocks. Massive asteroids rotated slowly on both sides of them. The transport ship slipped through the tight space with only meters to spare. Behind them, the first alien warship tried to follow, but it was too large. One of its wings struck a spinning asteroid. The impact caused a huge explosion that shattered the rock into thousands of fragments. The warship broke apart in a burst of fire and metal. Leary gasped in shock as she watched the explosion behind them. One ship left, she said quietly. Aaron nodded slowly, but at that moment, the control panel flashed again. The engine power began dropping once more. Leary leaned back in her seat, breathing heavily. I cannot keep controlling the system, she said weakly. I am too tired. Aaron looked at the radar again. The final alien warship had survived the asteroid chaos, and now it was flying straight toward them. Faster than before, Aaron leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing as he studied the radar and the star map together. Well, he said quietly, looks like this chase isn't over yet. Outside the cockpit window, the asteroid field slowly began to thin out. Open space waited just ahead of them, but so did the last enemy ship and this time, it was moving in for the final attack. The small transport ship finally escaped the thick asteroid field and drifted into open space. Behind them, the last alien warship burst out from the rocks like a dark predator, its engines burning bright as it closed the distance inside the cockpit. The warning alarms were still ringing, and the engine power was dropping again. Aaron kept both hands on the controls, his eyes fixed on the radar screen. Only one enemy ship remained, but it was powerful and fast. Leary sat quietly in the second seat, breathing slowly as she tried to recover her strength. Using the glowing device had drained most of her energy. Her small hands were still resting near the metal sphere on the console. "They will not stop," she said softly. Aaron nodded slightly. "I figured that," he replied calmly. Outside the window, stars stretched across the endless darkness. But the peaceful view did not match the danger behind them. The alien warship suddenly fired another energy beam. The bright blast passed close to the transport ship and exploded far ahead in space. It was another warning shot. "They want us to stop," Leary whispered. Aaron gave a small smile. "Yeah," he said. "Not happening." He checked the control panel again. The engines were still damaged and could not keep running at high speed for much longer. If they continued like this, the warship would catch them soon. Aaron thought quietly for a moment. Then he slowly looked at the glowing sphere on the console. "Leary?" he said. "Yes?" She answered weakly. "That device you used earlier." Aaron continued. "Can it connect to other ships?" Leary blinked in surprise and looked at the sphere. "Maybe," she said slowly, "if their systems are not protected too strongly." Aaron leaned back in his seat slightly. "That might be enough," he said. Leary looked at him with confusion. "What are you planning?" she asked. Aaron turned the ship slightly so that the enemy warship was directly behind them. The radar showed the distance between them getting smaller every second. "I'm going to get us very close to them," he explained. Leary's eyes widened. "In shock, that is dangerous," she said quickly. Aaron chuckled softly. "Everything today has been dangerous," he replied. "But this might end the chase." He reduced the ship's speed slightly, allowing the alien warship to get closer. The enemy ship seemed to notice the change and began moving in faster. Its massive shape grew larger in the window behind them. Inside the cockpit, the alarms became louder as the distance closed. "Now," Aaron said quietly. Leary quickly grabbed the glowing sphere and placed her hands around it again. The blue light spread across the console like before. She closed her eyes and focused with all her remaining strength. The light slowly reached the ship's communication systems and then extended outward into space. Leary's mind searched for the enemy ship's systems. For a moment there was nothing. Then suddenly she felt it. The warship's control network appeared in her mind like a maze of signals and energy. "I found it," she whispered weakly. Aaron kept the transport ship steady, flying straight ahead. "What can you do?" he asked. Leary struggled to control the strange systems inside her mind. "They are strong," she said, "but maybe I can interrupt them." The blue light grew brighter as she pushed harder. Inside the alien warship, several control panels suddenly flickered. The ship's navigation system glitched for a moment. The warship drifted slightly to the side. Aaron noticed immediately. "That's it," he said. "Keep going." Leary focused harder, though her body trembled from exhaustion. For a few seconds the warship struggled to maintain its course. Then suddenly its engines fired unevenly. The massive ship began drifting directly toward a large floating asteroid that had broken away from the earlier battle. The alien crew tried to correct the course, but their systems were confused and delayed. Aaron quickly pulled his ship away and turned sharply to the side. A moment later the warship crashed directly into the giant asteroid. A massive explosion lit up the darkness of space. Fire and metal burst outward in every direction as the enemy ship was destroyed. Inside the cockpit of the transport ship, the bright light filled the window for a moment before fading away. Then everything became quiet again. The alarms slowly stopped ringing. The radar screen showed no more enemies. Aaron leaned back in his seat and exhaled slowly. "Well," he said calmly, "I think that's the end of that." Beside him, Leary slowly opened her tired eyes. The blue light from the sphere faded as she lowered it onto the console. "They are gone?" she asked softly. Aaron nodded with a small smile. "They're gone," he said. Leary looked out at the stars for a moment, her face finally relaxing after all the fear and running. "You saved me," she whispered. Aaron shook his head gently. "We saved each other," he replied. The small ship slowly turned toward a distant, peaceful planet, visible on the navigation map. A quiet colony world where no one would be hunting them. Leary watched the stars pass by the window and then looked at the human beside her. "You are not a monster," she said softly. Aaron smiled slightly as he guided the ship toward their new destination. "No," he said, "just a human."